a really quick summary of who E. Jean Carroll is. E. Jean Carroll is a lady who was a former advice columnist and author who sued Donald Trump in 2019 under two cases, both civil, for defamation and for sexual assault. And she sued him because she alleges that he raped her in the mid 1990s in a New York department store. And of course, Donald Trump denies these allegations. And there was two separate trials to cover both of the civil suits against him, one for defamation and one which was for the actual sexual abuse, but it was based on a survivor's law in New York City. And one trial led to her getting a judgment of 83 million and the other a judgment of 5 million. And she just recently got 5 million or 5.6 million from Donald Trump. And the other 83 million that she was owed, we don't know what's going to happen with that. So that's the case with E. Jean Carroll. I did not follow that case. I did not watch the trial. I did not read about it. I know that what she accused him of. I know he was convicted for a civil trial, which is different than a criminal trial. He was convicted of sexual assault, not rape. It was kind of weird. But again, I don't want to judge whether I believe it or not based on the people involved, because obviously I hate Donald Trump with a passion, and I know that he's bragged about being able to sexually assault women. So of course I would believe that he did that. But I know that these cases, you have to look at the evidence. And so I didn't look at the evidence, so I can't say one way or the other. But right now I want to talk about justice and what justice is. And so for the sake of this, we're going to just assume that E. Jean Carroll was correct and that her allegations are true and that Donald Trump did assault her in a dressing room in the mid-1990s. And she has since received 5 million or over 5 million for that. And people are claiming the victory of justice. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we learned that E. Jean Carroll was actually awarded the 5.6 million, people were celebrating. And of course, it seems like it just comes down to whether you're a Trumper or MAGA or not. So the people who like Trump are going to like him no matter what and defend him no matter what. And the people who hate Trump are going to hate him no matter what and believe allegations. But yeah, so I think a lot of people were just happy to see him have to take some kind of accountability, even though, of course, he's denying these allegations. I just think he seems to get away with everything. And so here's one little tiny thing that, he can't get away with or he has to make up for in some way. And of course, if he really did assault her, I think justice would be that he was in prison and not the president of the United States. But that's the point of this video that I'm doing, is that I'm kind of confused about why everyone is calling this justice when I look at the broader concept of justice. To me, this case, I'm glad for E. Jean Carroll. I am. I don't have any issue with her. I might sound critical of her in this. I keep wanting to say TED Talk. I'm a teacher, and so I was just looking at TED Talks for a class that I'm teaching tomorrow. So TED Talks are on my brain. I don't actually think I'm giving a TED Talk. I'm not delusional. So justice. What is justice? To me, again, this particular case might show justice for E. Jean Carroll, and justice in the fact that finally something happened that Trump, has to pay for in some respect. But looking at the broader perspective of justice, specifically social justice, to me, this case shows what is wrong with our legal system and what is so unjust about it. So I have a little cheat sheet here on my husband's phone, and I am going to read to you the definition of justice. Justice is the principle of fairness in the way people are treated. Rights are respected and benefits and burdens are distributed. At its core, it means giving people what they are due according to moral, legal, or ethical standards. Okay, I'm going to put my glasses on because I cannot see this. Okay, so then there's different types of justice. There's legal justice, moral justice, social justice, distributive justice, and so on. And so I'm going to talk about two. I'm going to talk about legal justice and social justice. So legal justice, because that's what this is. It's a legal justice. When people are talking about justice, they probably mean through the legal system because it was a situation that involved the legal system. So the definition of legal justice is applying laws fairly and impartially, ensuring people are held accountable and their rights are protected. So I don't see how anyone could argue the fact that the legal system does not apply fairly or impartially. It just doesn't. It's all based on money. And so first of all, E. Jean Carroll, she wasn't a billionaire or anything like that, but she did have, I'm sure, millions of dollars, and was a well-respected woman with some power. And so I don't think just any random person would be able, the lawyers for E. Jean Carroll, I do not believe, would have taken her case if she wasn't who she is and didn't have the influence that she has. And of course, if Donald Trump wasn't wealthy, if she was accusing somebody of assault from 30 years ago who was not wealthy, and most people aren't wealthy, the lawyers wouldn't take the case. They took the case because she had money to pay them, and because they knew the person she was suing was extremely wealthy and had the money to give. And actually, she paid them based on, she didn't pay them an hourly rate. Like they weren't charging $2,000 an hour like Blake Lively's attorneys, but she paid them based on how much money she made, and then they took a percentage of it. So they knew that they could have a huge field day or payday with this lawsuit. That's why they took it. That's why most lawyers take laws. That's why most lawyers take on clients and would take on a client who was going against a rich, powerful person, because that means there's a lot of money involved. And it also adds to the fame and influence of the attorney. And so this idea that the law applies to everyone equally is bullshit. It applies to the wealthy. Like everything else in society, yes, the wealthy get the benefit of justice. It's like Alan Jackson, who wanted to take on Nick Reiner's case. Why does he want to take on Nick Reiner's case? I guess because Nick Reiner's such a morally upstanding citizen? No, he wants to take on Nick Reiner's case because Nick Reiner butchered his parents who were wealthy. So now Nick Reiner has access to his parents' money, and he can pay Alan Jackson with that money. That's why Alan wanted to take on that case. And I don't think he gives a shit if he is able to convince the jury that Nick Reiner was not guilty by reason of insanity, and then Nick Reiner goes to a psychiatric hospital, gets out eventually, murders somebody again. Alan Jackson got his money. He did his job. Okay, so I'll stop with that because I will go off on my soapbox. So that's legal justice, and how anyone can consider our legal system just when it's really based on money. That would be delusional. And the other type of justice that I want to talk about is social justice. So social justice is promoting fairness in society by addressing inequalities and ensuring equal opportunities and access to resources. So I've talked before about, like, my channel is the combination or the intersection of politics with pop culture. So it's actually pop culture, but when politics are involved, I really like to talk about it. So in this situation, I've talked about how there's two different sides of liberalism or progressivism. There's the social justice side, and then there's the economic justice side, where, people should, almost like a socialist idea that people all are, just by being born, we have rights to healthcare, education, all of that, food, shelter maybe. And I would agree with that stance. I think every human being deserves at least basic health care and education and food and those kinds of things. And so I think it's weird that the progressives are, celebrating this victory because it's a social justice victory to them. Finally, a woman who is a victim is able to get money for what she suffered by the hands of this horrible, evil, powerful guy who's gotten away with everything else. So I see that point of it. But looking again at the broader picture, how is this social justice when everyone else, like, there's millions of women and men and boys and girls in this world who have been abused or who are currently being abused and who would never, ever be able to do what E. Jean Carroll did. They would, for one thing, the person who is their abuser is probably poor, doesn't have any money. That no lawyer wants to take on their case to go after. I mean, imagine how many people currently right now are being molested by somebody. There's not enough lawyers who could take on the cases for all of these people. And so the only way that you really seem to see justice is when you see it with the wealthy. And in some cases, it's the perpetrator who's wealthy, not the victim. And I think it has to be one or the other. Somebody has to be wealthy here. The lawyers have to make money somehow. So if the person who is claiming or alleging abuse is wealthy, then they have the money to pay the attorney. The attorney will probably take them on under the guise of, feminism and protecting women, only rich women. And, or if the woman doesn't have a lot of money, but the person she's making allegations of has a lot of money, they might take on that case because they could earn a lot of money from, like what they did with the E. Jean Carroll case by getting a percentage of whatever money is owed. So either way, it's all about money. So the people who have been abused horrifically for 30 years by somebody who doesn't have any money, where's their justice, right? How is that justice for them? So I went and I kind of talked about this a little bit on social media just to kind of get a feel for what people think about it. And nobody really seemed to agree with my stance. People just kept saying, well, that's justice. She got justice. And they weren't seeing that I'm talking about the overall justice system. Why does it work for her, but so many other people it doesn't work for? Well, it's money, right? Because so many other people, their abusers aren't wealthy. There's no reason for the attorneys to take on that case because they're not going to get money from that case. So this type of justice, like being able to sue in a civil court of law and make millions of dollars, only applies to women or victims who are wealthy, or if their perpetrators are wealthy, which excludes the vast majority of people because the vast majority of people aren't wealthy. And so there's not like a lawyer or anyone who's going to really care about that. And I think most people would agree that the justice system is very impartial or very partial to wealth and money because we're a capitalistic society. That's what makes the world go round. But again, when I posted this question and asked people just kept saying, well, it's justice for her and I'm really happy for her. And I think people get defensive because they think that I'm kind of implying that she's lying or that she didn't deserve it. And that's not what I'm implying. I'm not implying that. What I'm asking is if she deserves that, why doesn't the 12-year-old girl who's being abused by her mommy's third boyfriend of the year, why isn't she deserving of that? Because she doesn't have money, her mommy doesn't have money, and the abuser doesn't have money. So again, I think that's the exact reason why a capitalistic society is so unjust. And this is just another example of how unjust that is. That doesn't mean I'm not happy for E. Jean Carroll. A while back, E. Jean Carroll was on the Rachel Maddow show after she had just won the $83 million. But again, we don't know if she's actually going to be given $83 million. Of course, Donald Trump will do anything he can to avoid that. But she was on Rachel Maddow and she was talking about this. Well, here, you watch it for yourself.
You've talked about using some of Trump's money that you're about to get to help shore up women's rights. Do you know what that might be, what that might look like?
Yes, Rachel. Yes.
Tell me.
I had such great ideas for all the good I'm going to do with this money. First thing, Rachel, you and I are going to go shopping. We're going to get completely new wardrobes, new shoes, motorcycle for Crowley, new fishing rod for Robbie. Rachel, what do you want? Penthouse? It's yours,
Nothing.
Rachel. Penthouse and France? You want France? You want to go fishing in France? No? Oh, all right, okay.
That's a joke. Okay, so I'm sure that she was trying to be funny, and so she got some, criticism for this because she was taking it too lightly and she was joking about spending all this money. And she might have been joking, but I still think it's a pretty weird thing to do. And you could tell her attorneys were very embarrassed. You could tell Rachel Maddow was very embarrassed or shocked when she said that. And so, because she's playing into what people will accuse her of, which is being money hungry. And there are a lot of women and men who make allegations now, maybe not in the past, but now that we're seeing the Me Too movement And they're seeing that if the person you're accusing of is wealthy, you can get a payday, you can get a magazine cover, you can get all these things. And I think that most like real victims don't want that kind of fame. So I think that really draws the fake victims and the ones who want the money, want the fame, want the power, want the vengeance, something, and might make up these allegations. I don't think that's E. Jean Carroll, but I think that it kind of plays into the Amber Heards of the world. And okay, so let's talk about Amber Heard, or let's talk about something else that somebody commented on when I asked on social media for people's opinions. And I didn't get very many responses. I just got a few. Okay, so back to social justice and Amber Heard and all that. Another thing somebody mentioned is that a woman said that E. Jean Carroll this wasn't about money, it was about justice, and victims want justice, not money. And first of all, every victim's different. Some victims want money, some don't. If you have money, it's easy to say you don't want money. But really, if you don't have a lot of money, we all want money. I want money because my floors are horrible looking and they're embarrassing and they're full of scratches. And for the last 15 years, I've said I needed new floors and I have yet to feel like I can afford that. So yes, I would love some money. I would love to take a trip to Disney World with my kids. I want money just to, to live a modest life, but we all want money. This is the capitalistic society. This is that the lawyers who are fighting for these women, they don't want justice, or they want justice, not money. Bullshit. The only reason they're doing it is for money. And they're going to defend somebody who's lying, whether they're defending a person who did rape someone or defending a person who's making an allegation of rape that's not true. The lawyers are going to defend that because that's their job. And they do that, even though it's an extremely immoral, unethical job, they do that because it makes them money. I couldn't have kids without money because I dealt with infertility. To even have a baby, if you have infertility issues, you have to have money. You have to have money for healthcare, to stay safe, to not be sick, to eat. So to say that people don't want money, I think it's okay to want money. And I think to say I don't want money when you're asking for money is really problematic. And I think we don't need to have two different things, that the justice system in these cases, the justice is money, but then we don't really want money. We just want justice. No, if we're going to give money as a form of justice, then just be honest and say that is people want money. And this is one way to serve justice, right? Just be honest with that. But for some reason, people think they can't say that. So Amber Heard, remember, she wanted people to believe her and wanted people to not think that she was after Johnny Depp just for his money. So she said, and went on the interview circuit and said that she did not want anything and that she donated every cent of her divorce settlement to charity, half to the Children's Hospital and half to the ACLU. And that was completely a lie.
Twisted that whole argument. What did you do with that money?
$7 million in total was donated to, I split it between the ACLU and Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
ACLU is a human rights organization.
Sorry, ACLU is a prominent organization, nonprofit organization in the United States. Yeah. It's called the American Civil Liberties Union, and they work on behalf of marginalized communities on the ground and in legislative reform.
Right.
And
well, more power to you, because that's something that I've never heard
I wanted nothing.
She'd only donated a very slight amount, and that came from Elon Musk or Johnny Depp himself. The ACLU still had her as their ambassador for domestic violence for years after that. They had her there because she was supposed to give them money. She never gave them money, but that's why they had her as the ambassador. Do you think they would have her for any other reason? Because she's such a symbol of peace and, a respectful relationship? That woman was a monster. Even if you believe that she was abused by Johnny Depp, she was abusive to men and women before that. She lied about donating to a children's charity in the ACLU. And she's abusive. She was physically abusive with other people. So how could she be the ambassador for gender-based violence? And lesbian relationships have more domestic violence than heterosexual relationships. So condoning that when she was physically violent with past females in her relationships, it makes no sense to me. Again, it's this whole idea that these rich celebrities are taking over these social justice movements, and now they're no longer social justice movements. You can't call these social justice movements when they only work for the wealthy and the powerful people. So that's it for me. I just, I don't have the answer. I just know, to me, it doesn't feel like justice, except in that one situation, but it doesn't feel like justice holistically. It doesn't feel like justice for all of the victims who will never see a dime. So good for E. Jean Carroll, and I'm not saying that sarcastically. I truly mean that. And if she was lying and this never happened, then not good for her. But I'm assuming, just assuming that she was honest and that this really happened to her, good for her. And, and my was about Trump, because I was going to say something about him. I'm just, forget it. I don't want to get too worked up here. But I'm just asking you, what do you think? Do you think that this is an example of justice, or do you think this is an example of how unjust our system is if you do not have money?